Welcome back to the Athletes Podcast. This is episode 98 featuring Tim Perreira, the founder of Per Clothing, a former sales rep, previously college baseball player for Sonoma State. We dive back into his background in athletics, how entrepreneurs and athletes are synonymous. This has been a consistent message on the Athletes Podcast, something that we're going to continue to highlight. Super excited for this episode for you folks to listen, tune in wherever you're consuming it. We appreciate it. This is episode 98 of the Athletes Podcast featuring Tim Perreira. Here we go. Well, that's where we start, welcoming Tim Perreira to the Athletes Podcast for episode 98. It's crazy. We're almost at a hundo. It's wild. Tim, thanks for joining the show. Appreciate it. Excited to dive into the life of a former college baseball player turned software sales, now turned sustainable apparel creator. Thanks for coming on. I'd love for you to dive in, give people a Cole's Notes version of you, your history, how you've gotten to this point, how you're now creating a sustainable clothing, and ultimately what is Per Clothing.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. Super excited. Almost got the 100th episode, but hopefully you're saving that for somebody famous and special.
Every single person who comes on the Athletes Podcast is important, but we do have someone special in mind, that's for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, so like you're saying, college athlete. I played baseball my whole life and a lot of other sports, and this transition into starting my own company and whatnot has been interesting. I think, especially speaking to former athletes, college athletes, pro athletes, whatever. There's that transition period I think a lot of us went through where you're in college, and if you're not, most of us aren't dead set on what we want to do afterwards professionally. Most of us are dead set on making it professionally in the sport we're playing. And then it's usually, there's usually a time when it kicks in where it's like, all right, I'm not going to make it, or I'm not going to get drafted, or, whatever it is. And, for me, I had no idea. I was studying business, getting good grades and whatnot, and actually wasn't very good at baseball at a collegiate level. I was on the team, but really didn't play much. So I kind of, it's kind of a slow burn, but I knew after a while it wasn't going to work at the next level. And so I was just trying to figure out what was next. I think for a lot of people in the easy path, the one that made sense was sales, getting into something where there's, obviously you're held to, metrics. You're incentivized to make more money. There's a team environment. It's really competitive. You're competing against yourself quarter over quarter, month over month. So I did that for a few different software companies, few different spots in the US, San Francisco, New York, Chicago, back to San Francisco now. And for me, I think what happened was I think like a lot of people, I was kind of chasing shiny objects and looking for the sales jobs that were lucrative, or, were paying well, or the unlimited PTO or whatnot. And, after a while, I just wasn't in very good environments, wasn't in good team environments, or didn't have great leadership, or the asks from the company weren't always ethical, I would say. And it was really frustrating. And I went through a whole kind of personal health tailspin for a while as well with, 4 years of kind of feeling super unfulfilled, but then depression, weight gain, bunch of anxiety, and all this stuff. And so last year, what happened, to kind of fast forward, was in the middle of the pandemic, was, in a sales role, managing kind of a, territory, and COVID hit, and we were selling to a lot of schools and banks and stuff, and businesses that weren't able to purchase, right? They shut down, and sales suffered and whatnot. I ended up kind of being in a really crappy situation, and ended up getting let go and getting fired. And it was this massive reset for me. And of course, in hindsight, I was like, best thing that ever happened to me. And I was like, I haven't been happy in sales roles. And so one thing that I've always wanted to do is start my own company. In the last few years, the only idea I've kept coming back to is a sustainable men's activewear brand. Growing up playing sports, I'm sure you you're in all this workout gear, uniforms, you're used to all this, the jerseys that just don't fit right or uncomfortable, the training shorts, whatever it is. So that's something I just kind of grew up being obsessed with. And I was like, you know what, this is kind of this is the moment.
Mm,
And so from there, just kind of jumped all in, not knowing a thing about apparel, and got started.
gotcha. And so, there's a couple of things to it. I think one of the first things that's really interested in is this connection between entrepreneurship and athletics and the competitive nature that comes with being an entrepreneur. And I think that's why so many athletes end up moving into owning their own businesses, trying to operate their own businesses, because they love having that additional pressure, like you said, in a sales environment where you're able to come in, look at those key metrics that you're having to kind of follow. And at the end of the day, it's clear cut. You either win or you lose. You hit your target or you don't. And I think that's why, again, a lot of athletes also end up in sales roles where they can compete with others still in a, quote unquote aggressive environment, right? Where they can still have that energy going towards something. Why do you decide to do men's activewear? I mean, between Lululemon, Gymshark, and the 100+ other apparel companies that are out there, to play devil's advocate, what was the attractive aspect? Where did you see a gap in men's activewear?
Yeah, I think, when I looked at my 8 favorite pairs of shorts, that's what we're starting with, is a pair of shorts.
Okay.
I felt like there was something missing with each of them. When I thought of a brand like Lulu, I'm like, great brand, but I don't see them as a men's brand,
Mm,
right? In Gymshark, massive brand, but I see them as like a lower price point, not sustainably, focused or eco-conscious, right? So
right.
for me, I was thinking, I was like, it'd be super cool to have a brand, not just that focuses on making great gear, but one that helps men be healthy,
Mm,
and that's a focus when I think of sustainability and health of the planet, but also, sustainability in our lives, and what's, realistic practices that we can implement to become more and more healthy. And so that was a big difference. I kind of see it as being a wellness company down the line. But
mm.
for me, that's really what's been motivating. And there's a lot of the stigma around, men's mental health and prioritizing, and how we got to suck it up and be tough all the time, and great, and that's awesome, and it serves its place. But I felt more so from a brand perspective, there was an opportunity to create gear that's, super intentional and purpose built, and have, um, kind of this vision behind the brand of something greater than just, yeah, let's get some dope shorts and throw a cool logo on it, and, pay for some Instagram ads. So, yeah. And then, from a product side, I had some little bits and features. So I kind of Frankenstein together these shorts that I love, or of all the bits of the other shorts that I like, to create something that I love. But that was kind of the opportunity that I saw, and really what I wanted to jump into and fill.
Gotcha. And was it like, I'm trying to piece together here for you? Obviously, you're attending Sonoma State, playing baseball there.
Yeah.
You said you don't necessarily play much. Was this idea percolating back then? Where does the idea stem from? Kind of obviously, you have this sustainable online clothing brand is kind of the back north star, but where does it come from? Like, is this something that's always been a priority in your health, or what's why choose sustainable clothing?
Yeah, it's funny. I think as I started probably 5 or 6 years ago, I started to think, again, in that environment where I'm selling and I was doing really well as a rep, I was like, wait, if I can come in and crush it here and be the number one rep out of 100 plus, I was like, there's a lot of transferable skills. Like I should, start a business, or, whatever one. I was like, if I can, own this book and make a
Hmm.
certain amount of money, I was like, I should be able to do something on my own. What I was really after was the freedom. I loved, like, every time I would hit my quota, for the month, that next Monday, I would, message the director and be like, hey, by the way, I need these 3 weekend, or like these 3 Fridays off coming up, so I could get some 3-day weekends. And I was like, I love it, because
Yeah.
I'm doing well and I could take advantage of it. And so the freedom piece, I was like, okay, if I do my own business, I can work from anywhere. And so, but it was crazy. The idea that I kept coming back to, I think, as I was saying, is clothing.
Mm.
And every time I was like, that's a dumb idea. There's plenty of brands. And I was like, why don't you come up with something cool, like an app or, something you can become a billionaire doing? Stupid, stupid thought. And then I heard one of the sharks, I think it was Barbara, from Shark Tank, was saying, if there's an idea that you cannot get out of your head, it's worth exploring.
Mm.
And so that was it. I was like getting out of bed one day and I was like, this is it. I was like, I got to make some shorts. I was like, it's been my biggest pain point for years. I was like, this is what we got to do. And as far as sustainability, growing up in San Diego and beach communities and everything, something that always I think irritated me was just trash left on the beach,
Mm.
and seeing the images of the garbage patch and just plastic floating in the ocean. And so my mindset was, okay, let's find a company that's harvesting plastic, recycling it and turning it into fibers, and we can recycle and repurpose that and make clothing out of it. So it was kind of funky. There definitely wasn't like a single point or whatnot, but it all kind of came together. And I think when I think of why clothing growing up too, I'm the guy that I would walk through the store kind of eyes closed with my hands, just feeling the clothing, or, touching all the folded jeans or shirts or whatnot, and only really become interested like once I felt something that really stood out to me. So I've always kind of
Mm.
just been obsessed with the feel of clothing. And yeah, so all of those, 3 or 4 bits kind of came to a head, and it made sense just to be like, yeah, this is something that actually makes sense and that I'm passionate about.
Yeah, well, and with the way that e-commerce continues to grow and scale, it's not a bad business to be in. And obviously, if it's your passion and something you can believe in, then it's a win-win, right? That's kind of it's funny you bring up Barbara from Shark Tank, because I actually came across your page while doing some search for my full-time job in Clearco, which is founded by Michelle Romanov, who is on Dragon's Den, which is the Canadian equivalent of Shark Tank.
Yeah.
So, and our role is identifying founders, individuals who could scale from an injection of capital. And that's where we had this conversation of how we could help Per Clothing put it together. And what if we're able to provide you with some exposure via this platform as well, then that's a pretty exciting thing to be able to do, right? Because I see this being a conversation that we look back on in a couple of years, and Per Clothing being a staple in a lot of people's wardrobes. So, exciting times for sure, obviously. And how hard has it been, right? Like, I think that's one of the things that I love to bring up, kind of the misconceptions that,
Yeah.
Obviously with the Athletes podcast, we're typically featuring, big four athletes who are currently playing. This being a little different, but I think there's some aligned stars here in the sense that there's a lot of what you learned going through school, playing as an athlete, that you're now applying when it comes to the entrepreneurship and building your own brand. What have been some of these challenges of making this sustainable clothing brand?
Yeah, and there have been. It's I think one of the takeaways, especially, something I keep going back to, super lucky, is the mindset that we cultivate, as athletes
Mm.
growing up. And I didn't go to, a school where we had, predetermined wait times or classes or anything. It was all on our own. So we had to kind of figure out how to motivate ourselves, how to grow, how to figure it out. And I think I've just carried that with me, and it's in always wanting to, get better in whatever it is, in health, wellness, knowledge, fitness, anything. So I think it played really well as I transitioned. And I'll, be super clear. I was just a software sales. Like, I was just demoing people and, asking for business and calling them too much at the end of quarter, and, using some cheesy sales line or, urgency tactic to get them to buy. Definitely didn't have experience in, sourcing fabric and product design and, dealing with partners and launching a website and all this. So, what's been really challenging, and so kind of how it started actually is I didn't know where to begin, right? And you can't just go on and Google, okay, premium shorts manufacturer in China, right? Like, or wherever you're trying to, you don't, there's zero Google results. So you have to figure out, what the heck to do. So I told a couple people, I had a few initial phone calls with people that were either in textile manufacturing, apparel design, or someone who has ran, creative for one of the big, big athletic brands. And they just, they kind of pointed me in the right direction. So what I found out is it's not super difficult to source material and find a manufacturer and, get products. And what made what I was trying to do, 20 times harder was the sustainability aspect. I think it was really challenging to find companies that even knew, partners that knew really what sustainability was and were committed to it. You'd get a lot of stuff like, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we have some recycled gear. But, really my message to them was like, this is what I want to do. I want to make ultra high quality gear, like truly premium gear made from sustainable material. And what was tough is it was really hard to source sustainable fabric. The first partner we reached out to took them 6 months, didn't actually come back with anything, and kind of had to start over again and figure out ways to find it. But the thing that was really eye-opening to me, or shocking, I would say, in the apparel industry is almost how these partners would start at the bottom, right? They would ask questions like, okay, well, what do you want your sales price to be? Right. And then from there, they work backwards to be like, okay, well, we need to fit all of these items or materials into a certain cost structure. And while I understand, right, cost and profitability is essential, for any business, to keep growing and stay in business, for me, it didn't make sense. I'm like, guys, let's pause really quick. What I want to make sure is that we're making the highest quality gear. Let's start with quality and what we want to accomplish before starting with, okay, what's the cost we want this item to be? It was really backwards, right?
Gotcha.
And I felt like I was repeating myself for 6 months, reiterating that, right? I would say, hey, I want recycled fabric. This is what I'm looking for, blah, blah, blah. And I would get a call and be like, hey, we found a bunch of fabric for you. It's in the mail. Check this stuff out. I say, great, that's awesome. They go, we couldn't find any recycled, but we think you'll like this anyway. And it's half the price. And I'm like, I'm not even going to open the package.
Yeah, you're missing the point here.
So that was super tough. And then the challenges with COVID and, of course, and shipping delays and working with, we found a couple manufacturers overseas. I wanted to do everything here domestically in the States, but, the labor alone would have cost like 2.5 times more than the overall cost. So we found someone in Sri Lanka, and just, the challenges of being a very detail oriented and organized person, knowing exactly what I want, and dealing with people on the other end that maybe don't prioritize that or are focused on other things. So yeah, really, really honing in on the quality of products. And I felt like every time we would take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, or they were only hearing 80% of what I was saying. And so, at a project where it was communicated to me, they thought it would take 4 to 6 months to go from ideation to getting production in hand. And it's been, 14 months, and we haven't quite started production yet.
Yeah, the timetables always seem to be adjusted according to the 100 other variables that go along with it, right? It's never goes 100% according to plan, but that's, if you're a fan of Gary Vaynerchuk, where you or any other person now, it seems, Joel Embiid, whoever the case, it's you got to trust the process, right, and enjoy the process. And I think that's what has been nice for me, being able to connected with you over the past couple of months, following what you do on LinkedIn, which is interesting because your goal is to destigmatize men's mental health, the wellness education. I'd love for you to touch on that, maybe explain a little deeper as to what your goal is with that on social media. Obviously, this is something that is near and dear to your heart. So, yeah. And to me, I'm like, this is something that I've enjoyed being able to consume your content as well. So could you maybe touch on that and explain where that inspiration comes from, and maybe what your goals are with that? Is that going hand in hand with Per? Like, where's your head at with all of that?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's new, right? It's a new, maybe not perspective, but sharing it is new. And I, somebody that people that have known me a long time, grew up, have two brothers, not really in a family that expressed feelings in a certain way or communicated, or and it's not like it's my family, like society, how we kind of cultivate men in society is to be, like we were saying, suck it up, don't show vulnerability, don't show weakness. And I think for me even more so, like I would be very much on the extreme of it, and not something I would ever share. Wouldn't even talk to one of my best friends about, man, I'm pretty bummed out for whatever reason, or I'm going through this certain challenge.
Do you think that's because of maybe what you're brought up with as well, and from the athlete's perspective, and like just that being the locker room dugout, you got to get hard, stay tough, don't give in to feeling crappy, whatever, because that's as an athlete growing up, you think of how many years we were spent told to, oh, suck it up, get over it, whatever, right? Like, is that, I'm trying to relate it back to athletes here and how the next generation will absorb this. And I think for me, that's where I'm really honing in on, is the fact that it's something that we're probably, to this day, kids are still being told that, and, it shouldn't necessarily be the case.
100%. And big influence, and even more with like the really physical sports. Baseball isn't super physical, but playing, or wrestling and football and that stuff, of course. And I think as you're saying that, I was like, man, even more so. I've always been in leadership positions on teams, and you're more aware of your actions, and or more sensitive to it, and am I doing the right thing? Am I displaying myself in the right way? um and I think, yeah, for sure, one of the things that, I mean, I don't know specifically if there was one thing, but yeah, I went through 4 years of kind of super bottled up, and everything. And one of the main things that I think was a turning point was, after a few years, I finally made the decision to go in and get some help.
That's what I was going to
And
ask. Like, how did you get over that? Because that's,
mhm,
frequently there will be people who are suffering from these things, but don't know how to get out of that rut, or aren't familiar with the resources that are available to them. And I'd love for you to share what your methods were.
yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, again, going back to being an athlete and growing up, like I was always under the impression, like, I'm gonna figure this out,
Mm.
and it start feeling bad here, and then next thing you know, 6 months have gone by, and I'm still like, but I'm still working at it every day. Whether it was sleep issues, I was like, I'm gonna do whatever I can to get better sleep, or I'm gonna read, or so many podcasts, and really try to figure it out on my own. I didn't want to tell people. I didn't want to be a burden. I didn't want to call my parents across the country and be like, this sucks, this is what I'm going through. Like, I didn't want them to worry about me. Same thing with friends, right? And I think that's, in some of the posts I have in LinkedIn, I'll get tons of messages with people be like, man, I did the same thing. I don't want to share because of, or let people know, because I don't want people to worry about me, or I want to do it on my own. So
Hmm.
for me, it was years of like trying to figure it out and trying to figure it out. So it wasn't like I was just, crushing dominoes and 40s of Old English on my couch every night. Wallowing. No, it was like I was trying to get better.
I shouldn't be laughing. It's the example that you used is funny because I
Yeah.
definitely have my fair share of dominoes, but
Yeah.
it's it is a serious note that, especially for men, but everyone for that matter, it is not easy to talk about your feelings, and if you're depressed or in a negative
Yeah.
state, like, to be able to come forward, share that publicly, and for you now to be building an audience around that, I think is extremely commendable. So I appreciate what you're doing. I'm glad
Yeah.
we were able to showcase a bit about Per Clothing, talk more. You're also a Friends for Youth mentor. Do you want to touch on that before we wrap up what's been a fantastic 30 minutes?
Yeah, for sure. So Friends for Youth is uh, just an organization here, I think just in the Bay Area, maybe in other parts of California. And, growing up, my dad was always at every single game I had, super supportive, big role model and impact in my life. And what I always wanted to do was be a mentor, and, Boys and Girls Club or whatever. And so anyway, I found this when I moved back to the Bay Area, and I was introduced to, a boy, 10-year-old kid. Dad hasn't been in his life at all. Was super into sports and everything. So basically I hang out with him, we play a bunch of sports. I take him out and push him into waves on a boogie board. I'm in a wetsuit. He's somehow in swim trunks in Northern California.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, it's been awesome. Super supportive mom, but just hasn't had, any kind of male figure in his life. So just wanted to be able to give back in a way that I always felt, like I was super fortunate to have, those role models and people in my life.
Yeah, obviously, just further ingrains the fact that you're a great person and someone I'm glad to have been able to chat with for half an hour here on the Athletes Podcast. I'd love for you to share your biggest piece of advice for the next generation of athletes. Tim, as a former baseball player, now turned entrepreneur, what do you got for us?
Man, I would say that it's so important to listen to what you want as a person, what's important to you, what your passions are. And it's really easy to try to go down the path of what society has, constructed to be the right path or what you're supposed to do. And ultimately that won't necessarily lead to happiness or being fulfilled. So I just can't stress enough that if you want to travel, if you want to take a year off, you want to go live in Australia, you want to go, work in a wolf sanctuary for the winter, or ski patrol or whatever, to do it, because you're really only here once, and those are the experiences that are going to fire you up, and the ones that you're going to remember.
I love it. I could not agree more. I just spent 2 days in Banff on a quick trip because why not, right? Took that mentality with it. So I appreciate all of your insights, Tim Perreira. Can you let everyone know where we can find you on social media, whether that being for your clothing line and yourself personally?
Yeah, so Per Clothing, PER, nice and simple, on Instagram. perclothing.com is our website, which will be getting a little facelift here in a bit as we launch. And then I'm on LinkedIn for the most part. That's where I put out most of my content. And Tim Perreira.
Perfect. Man, appreciate it again, your time. A lot of insights. I'm excited for those who are interested in consuming the Athletes Podcast to hear their feedback. It's going to be amazing. Thanks again, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks, for tuning into the 98th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Tim Perreira. Really hope you enjoyed the insights that Tim was able to share. Obviously, he is in a really unique situation as he launches Per Clothing, a sustainable clothing brand that is sure to be in many of your wardrobes after you get our AP15 discount code that I highly suggest you use. Pick up a pair of shorts, snap a pic in them, let us know what you think. You might just win some free gear. Thank you, folks, for tuning into the 98th episode of the Athletes Podcast featuring Tim Perreira. Please hit that like, comment, subscribe button. It means the world to us. Hope you have a great rest of your day, folks. Bye.